Hi, it's Barbara from Divine Creative Love. Today I have a brand new tutorial for you. It's going to be a watercolor sunset on Psalm 113, which is all about praising God. In verse 3 it says, "From the rising of the sun to the place where it sets, the name of the Lord is to be praised." So I thought that would be perfect for a beautiful sunset page. So we're going to be doing a watercolor sunset, kind of like this sunrise that I did for Lamentations 3:23 with the little silhouette at the bottom of the page. But instead of the sunrise, we're going to be doing a sunset. So if you're using a regular journaling Bible like mine, you'll want to use some clear gesso on it first to protect the page from the watercolors. Or if you're using an illustrating Bible, you can skip the gesso and just put the watercolor right on the page. And you can use whatever kind of watercolors you like. I'm using these Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolors, which is just what I had on hand. So I've got a yellow, red, blue, and a rose color. And I'm going to work from the bottom of the page up, starting with some orange and then going to pink and purple and then blue. But I encourage you to look up a picture, look up Google Images and look up pictures of sunsets and see one that you like. So the one that I liked, it starts with the pink and then the purple, the orange, pink, purple, and then the dark blue at the bottom. And it's sort of like a twilight sunset where you can see the stars coming out. So you notice right there, I let a little drop of watercolor go down in between the pages. So just be mindful that watercolor does drip. I tend to forget that it drips. So I started with the orange, and then I'm going to blend the pink into the orange, being a little extra careful to not let it drip too much into the seam between the pages. And I'm starting off very, very light. With watercolors, you can always get darker, but you can't go lighter once you have a dark color down on the page. So it's always good to start with a very light color. So the more water you add to the paint, the lighter the color will be. And then you can always go back in with more layers of color to make it darker. But then, like I said, once you get to a dark color, you won't be able to remove the dark color. So there I just added some purple, and then the rest of the sky is going to be the blue at the top. And in between each wash of color, I made sure to dry it. It works better to have each layer dry first before you lay down any more color on top, because when watercolors are still wet, then you could actually end up kind of moving the color around too much on the page, or even lifting some of the color off when you're trying to add more color. So I recommend drying it in between when you're wanting to add more color. So I went a little bit darker for this next layer. Just a little more of the orange and the pink. And again, being careful not to let it drip too much. And then I was creating more of that purple shade, but I want it to be a little bit more of a blue purple. so I had to add a little bit more blue. And as you're adding the different colors, bands, just be sure and blend each one into the next. And again, the less water that you add at this point, the more saturated your color will be. So as you go adding more layers, then you'll use a lot of water at first, and then to get the darker colors, you'll add less water to the paint. So at that point, it's looking pretty good, but there needs to be a lot darker color. So I'm drying this layer, and I'm just using the Ranger heat tool to dry it. And then I decided to just start with adding more blue for that top part. Since that part in a sunset, the look that I'm going for is like a really dark sky at the top. And actually I'm going to add some stars to it, so it really needs to be a dark blue. So I'm going back in one more time to add more blue. But then it's still not quite as dark as I would like it to be. You can always keep going and add more layers and make it darker and darker until you get it to however dark or however saturated you want it to be. So in this case, I didn't have any black watercolor to work with, so I kind of made my own like dark blue mix with some red and green and mixed it with the blue. So it kind of comes out like a really dark, like gray blue. And that's really more of the blue that I was looking for. It's not black, but it's just dark enough to give the impression that it's, you know, it's like the sunset is giving way to the dark blue sky, and the stars are starting to be visible. And since I had that nice dark blue sky now, then I decided to go back in and make the purple and pink and orange a little more saturated. They looked kind of pale now compared to the darkness of the blue. So I'm just mixing some of the blue and the pink to make that beautiful purple. And then finally, with that last little bit of orange, I mixed up some yellow and some red to make another really dark, pretty orange. And just remember, as you're adding more layers, still remember to blend each color together. So just blending the pink and the orange, kind of make it look like they're kind of blending into each other. And I think that turned out really gorgeous. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the top of the page and down, and I'm just going to add some stars. So this is a really cool marker spritzer tool. I usually use it with water-based markers, but this time I'm trying it with the Una white paint pen, and it actually works really good to make some little stars at the top of the page. So the closer you spray it to the page, the more dense the spray will be, and if you hold it up higher, it'll be like more sparse. But yeah, it created a really cool star effect. And I'll link to another video that I have that tells more information about that marker spritzer. It's a really cool tool to have. And then I decided to get a silver glitter gel pen and make a little border around Psalm 113. Always remember with gel pens, they're so easy to smudge. You see that I smudged the top of the little border there. They stay wet for quite a while, especially on the gessoed Bible page. They tend to stay wet, so just be careful not to smudge them. That's one reason that I was working from the top of the page down, so I wouldn't smudge things at the top. So this is a Sweet and Sassy Stamps set. It's called the Woman of Praise. And I'm just using the words Praise the Lord that I'm going to add to the page. Since Psalm 113 begins with Praise the Lord, and it ends with Praise the Lord, and of course there are a lot of good reasons to praise the Lord, but one of my favorites is for the beautiful sunsets. Every day brings a different one. I don't think I've ever seen the same sunset twice. So praise the Lord for his gorgeous creation. And I'm just using some black pigment ink to stamp with. And then to clean my stamps, I always just use a damp paper towel. There are stamp cleaners that you can buy at craft stores, but I've never actually tried them. I don't see any reason to have any special stamp cleaner. Just a damp paper towel with water works just as well. And I keep that handy little bottle of distilled water at my desk so I can clean things really easy. And my first intention was to use a pen to darken the words, Praise the Lord, but that pigment ink wasn't wanting to dry. I noticed when I touched it there that it was not dry. And so I decided to just leave it and let it dry a little bit longer and move on to the next thing, which is this Silhouette stamp set, which is also a Sweet and Sassy Stamps set. And I took the mountains from it. And I'm going to add the mountain range silhouette down at the bottom of the page. You'll notice the stamp set's actually in 2 pieces. That's because when I first bought it, I didn't have a stamp bin that was wide enough to accommodate it. So I actually cut it in 2 halves. I've since bought a bigger stamp bin. But, you know, if you have a small space to keep stamps in, you can always do that. So there I'm using the same black pigment ink to stamp the mountain range. It didn't really stamp that well. The pigment ink pad is actually kind of old. It's not the juiciest that it used to be. But I'm planning to go back over it with black paint anyway, so I just stamped twice to get it all the way across the bottom of the page, and that's good enough. So once that's clean, then I'm going to put the ink away and get the black paint. And what I'm doing is I mix a little bit of the black paint with some acrylic glazing liquid to make it a little bit thinner and easier to work with. And then I'm just going over the whole mountain range all across the bottom of the page. This is a great way to do it if your ink didn't stamp very well like mine, or if you had a stamp set that didn't fit all the way across the page like that, you can always go back and get some paint or some pans or markers and go over it. So this way the mountain range goes all the way across the page, even though that stamp wasn't wide enough. And then I just noticed that I had a couple of spots that I missed. And I thought that ink was dry, so I went in with my pigment micron pen and was trying to color it in, but it wasn't really working that well. Sometimes the pens, especially the pigment micron pen, tends to not work as well on top of a gessoed page, and it was kind of working, but it was not really working that great. Not to mention I was smudging the E with my finger. So ultimately I decided, I'm just going to paint it. And if you're like me and you smudge things, a good trick is to just put a piece of paper underneath your hands so you won't smudge it anymore. It seems like every time I do a Bible journaling page, I always smudge something. And I'm just filling in the letters with the black paint. You'll notice if you look closely at the letters, they have cute little highlights in them, so I'm kind of trying to go around those highlights. And then later, actually after I turned the camera off, I went back in with the silver glitter gel pen and filled in the little highlights to make them stand out more. So after I finished that part, I actually tried to fix that little black smudge, but ultimately I decided I am going to mess it up more by trying to fix it, so I decided to move on and do the last step, which is I just wanted to add the date at the bottom of the page right above the mountain range. So I chose a pink glitter gel pen to do that. And then it's all done. And at this point, I was tearing off the protective paper, and I actually pulled up a little bit of the page there at that very spot where I had the little drop of watercolor that went into the binding between the pages. It kind of messed up the page just a little bit. It didn't tear it though. It scared me a little bit, but it was okay. So you can see how gorgeous that turned out. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to subscribe to my channel so you won't miss any of my future Bible journaling videos. Bye!